She texted me, "We need to talk tonight." That was it. No heart, no warmth, no kiss emoji like she used to send. Just a flat, sterile sentence. And for some reason, my stomach dropped, like it knew something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. That night, she walked through the door wearing a different kind of confidence, something cold, sharp, calculated. She didn't kiss me. She didn't even look me in the eyes. Just tossed her coat on the back of the chair, set her phone face down on the counter like it was a ticking bomb, and said, "Can we sit?" She was already sitting when I turned around. That alone said everything. She was in control. My hands were still stained with grease from the busted sink I'd spent the last hour fixing. I stood there like an idiot, holding a wrench and waiting for a reason not to smash it through the drywall. Then she hit me with it. "I think we should separate." I swear to God, time paused. Just long enough for her words to dig through my chest and carve out something soft. Separate. After 7 years. After working back-to-back overtime shifts, giving up weekends, skipping Christmas vacations just to keep us financially afloat while she chased her golden MBA dreams. After pawning my dad's vintage Rolex to pay her last semester's tuition because she didn't want to take more student loans. Separate. That's the word she chose. I just blinked. Is there someone else? Her jaw tightened. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She said, "Don't make this ugly. Don't make this ugly." The woman I supported through 2 years of Ivy League torture porn, who used to cry on the couch over exam grades while I massaged her shoulders and told her she was brilliant, was now looking at me like I was the burden. Like I was a pothole on the sleek, fast road of her new life. I remember everything about that moment. The clicking of the kitchen clock. The sound of our dog scratching at the back door, ignored. The tightness in my chest like someone had clenched a fist around my ribs and squeezed until something cracked. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat down slowly, like my body was remembering how gravity worked. I asked her one thing. His name. She looked me dead in the face and said, "That doesn't matter anymore." So yes, there was someone. And yes, he mattered enough to throw away everything we'd built together. She got up, grabbed her phone, and walked out of the room like it was just another Tuesday. Left me sitting there in my own home, at the edge of a kitchen table I refinished with my bare hands during the second year of her MBA, because she wanted something rustic and warm. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on that same chair until morning. My brain kept replaying every little moment. Every time she said she was staying late at group study, every time she turned her phone upside down during dinner, every time she took a networking trip out of state. My memory had become a torture reel. At 4:37 a.m., I got up, walked to the garage, and pulled out the thick folder I'd nearly forgotten about, the one with every financial document she'd signed when I became the primary investor in her MBA fund. I'd handled all the paperwork back then, and she never asked questions. She just signed what I gave her. Trust. I opened the folder, and when I saw what I needed to see, that clause, that overlooked footnote buried in legal fluff, I realized something that made my hands tremble, but not from rage. She didn't read a damn thing she signed. And somewhere deep in those pages was my way out. No, not just out ahead. That morning, as the sun dragged its cold light across our living room floor, I stood barefoot, staring down at the hardwood I'd laid myself, every board nailed with care, every inch a reminder of the life I was building for us. And now, all I could see was a stage where she'd rehearsed her exit. I made coffee. Not for her. Just for me. Black. No sugar. I needed the bitterness. I needed to feel it. She came downstairs at 7:30, dressed for work like nothing had happened. Hair perfect. Makeup light, but flawless. That expensive navy blazer I bought her as a graduation gift. Yeah, the one she wore to her first big interview after getting her MBA, hugged her like armor. She barely glanced at me. "I'll be out late tonight," she said, grabbing her keys without even looking up. I didn't answer. I was too busy staring at her phone, the one she left on the kitchen island, unlocked, blinking with a new message from a number saved as M. I picked it up. My hands were steady. Dead steady. Can't stop thinking about last night. "I want to see you again before the board dinner." M wasn't just a fling. He was someone she wanted to impress. Someone who had power. I scrolled up. The texts went back months. Secret hotel bookings, flirtatious emojis, photos I'll never unsee, her in a robe, her with a glass of champagne, her thanking him for mentoring her in more ways than one. And then, the worst one. He still thinks he paid for my MBA. LMAO. It was your investment from day one. That was the moment my heart stopped beating like a normal human's and started clicking like a switchblade. She was laughing at me, mocking me. The folder I opened the night before suddenly felt like a loaded weapon sitting in my garage. She thought she was clever. She thought I was some dull, loving golden retriever too dumb to know when he's being kicked. But she forgot something important. I handled the finances. I knew every document, every clause, every loophole. While she was busy sleeping with her boss, I was the one wiring the tuition payments from our joint account. I was the one drafting the equity transfer forms for her restricted stock units at her new firm. And because I was technically her spouse and co-investor on all financial obligations, every form she lazily signed gave me just enough authority. I spent the entire day in my home office with that folder, cross-referencing emails, tracking grant letters, and pulling up her original MBA scholarship agreements. She'd asked me to handle the boring parts back then. And I had. Thoroughly. By 5 p.m., I had already contacted a discreet financial advisor I'd worked with once before. I told him the situation in plain terms. He asked if I had signed documents. I said yes. He asked if she had knowingly waived any contestation rights. I sent him a photo. He paused, then just said, "Bill, if you play this right, she won't even see it coming." I didn't respond. I just nodded into the silence. That night, when she came home smelling like someone else's cologne and pretending to be tired from a company mixer, I greeted her with a smile. I even handed her a glass of wine. She blinked, confused, but took it anyway. I sat with her on the couch. "You're right," I said calmly. "We should separate. I think it's time." She looked up from her phone, shocked. "Really?" "Yeah," I smiled. "Let's make it easy. Amicable. Clean. No need to drag it out." "And God help me," she smiled. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd outsmarted me. She even toasted her wine glass against mine and said, "Maybe we can be adults about this." I raised my glass and clinked it back. Of course. I already started moving things around. She paused. "What things?" I shrugged. "Just some investments. Paperwork. Old stuff. You probably don't even remember what you signed." And for the first time, just for a second, her eyes narrowed. That's when I knew she felt it. A sliver of doubt. A crack in her smug little world. Good. Let it grow. I had no intention of screaming, no plans for a dramatic fight. That wasn't my way. I was going to dismantle her carefully built empire with the same quiet precision I used to build it in the first place. And she wouldn't even realize the floor had disappeared beneath her until she was already midair. The next morning, I left the house early, before she woke up, just like I used to when I worked weekends to pay her tuition. Only this time, I wasn't headed to the office. I had a meeting. A very specific one. You see, during her second year in the MBA program, she had the bright idea to join a startup as a strategic advisor. Nothing major, just part-time consulting while she finished her degree. It was run by a former professor of hers and backed by one of those tech incubators in the city. She came home giddy, saying things like equity grants, advisory board, and founding partner status. At the time, I didn't fully grasp what she'd gotten herself into. But she was excited, so I supported her. Like an idiot. What she didn't know, or didn't care to read, was that the advisory agreement she signed listed me as her financial proxy. We'd set that up back when she was overwhelmed with paperwork, and she didn't want to miss any opportunities. So I handled the emails. I submitted the forms. I countersigned as co-investor. The company had issued her equity options vesting quarterly, tied to performance milestones. She had no idea that a revised form I submitted last year, after she forgot to update her tax info, included a trigger clause. That clause allowed me to reassign the options if she relinquished material interest in the marital partnership, a fancy way of saying if she dumped me while the equity was still vesting, I could transfer the shares. Fully legal. Fully executed. All filed through a sleepy little firm in Vermont that notarized everything by mail. So I sat in the sleek office of that startup's new CFO, sipping burnt coffee while she scrolled through a PDF on her monitor. Her expression shifted gradually from confusion to disbelief to silent respect. "You're saying she didn't read the reassignment memo?" "She signed it." You have it on file. We do. Well, that's quite rare. I'm aware. She leaned back in her chair and smiled like she was watching the end of a courtroom drama. Well, in that case, Mr. Hayward, those stock options are legally yours. She can't cash them out. She can't even touch them. And considering our next funding round is closing at 10 times valuation. I know what they're worth, I said. She gave a little nod. Then I assume you'll want a new wallet address for the next equity distribution? I left with the paperwork in a folder, neatly labeled and time-stamped. On my way out, I passed a glass-walled conference room. Through it, I saw my wife, or should I say, ex-wife in progress, laughing at something a tall man in a blue suit had just whispered into her ear. Her boss, M, the same guy who sent her that message. They hadn't seen me. Good. Let them laugh. Let them drink champagne. Let them make toasts and clink glasses and plan promotions. Because none of them knew that buried in her onboarding packet, another thing she never fully read, was a declaration form for conflict of interest and undisclosed financial relationships. It was designed to protect the company from insider deals or collusion. And since I now held her shares privately, and she was romantically involved with the firm's CEO without reporting it? Yeah, that was a fire alarm waiting to go off. Later that night, she came home late again. No apology. Just tossed her heels near the door and strutted into the kitchen like the queen of her own sitcom. You eat already? She asked, absently scrolling through her phone. I was on the couch, reading. Yeah. She poured herself wine. You always read those tax books? They're useful, I said without looking up. She chuckled like I was some accountant out of a bad Hallmark movie. Seriously, Bill. After the split, you need to get out more. Meet someone. You'll drive yourself crazy if all you do is sit around reading spreadsheets. I marked my page and closed the book. Slowly. You're right, I said. I'm already making changes. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was an unease creeping in now. Something about how calm I was. How prepared I sounded. But I wasn't done. Before bed, I logged into our joint cloud account. She hadn't changed the password. It was still Stanford 2020. I downloaded every receipt, every credit card statement, every reimbursement request she had filed during her MBA. Cross-checked them with the firm's expense reports. Highlighted the duplicates. Then I printed the ledger. Bound it. And the next morning, I slipped it into a heavy envelope. No return address. Just a single label on the front. For internal audit, confidential. In the company's headquarters. She still had no idea. None. She pranced around our house like some overworked executive goddess, humming in the morning, leaving dishes in the sink, texting M, right in front of me now like I was a doormat, like I didn't matter. She thought I was broken, defeated. She even started acting generous, offering to let me stay in the house a few more months while she figured things out with her lawyer, as if she was doing me a favor. I played dumb, nodded, smiled, said thanks, all while watching her walk around in those tailored suits I paid for, heels clicking on the hardwood I installed, heading off to work in the car I maintained and insured. Every single morning was like swallowing glass. But I waited, because I knew what was coming. 2 weeks after I mailed that envelope to internal audit, the first crack showed. It was a Wednesday. She came home earlier than usual, her heels in her hand, blazer draped over her shoulder, blouse wrinkled like she'd spent the whole day in a boardroom storm. No wine, no humming. She dropped her bag on the kitchen chair and just stood there, like the walls were spinning. You okay? I asked, not looking up from my laptop. She didn't answer right away, just hovered by the sink, staring into nothing. Finally, she said, I think there's going to be some corporate changes. Oh, I took a sip of coffee. What kind? She ran a hand through her hair, something she only did when things were out of her control. Internal audit flagged something weird in the onboarding docs. Something about share allocations and disclosure forms. I don't know. Legal's freaking out. Huh. I blinked. Weird. She stared at me like she was trying to read a foreign language on my face. Like part of her knew I wasn't as shocked as I should have been, but she couldn't prove it. She didn't say anything else. Just grabbed a granola bar and disappeared into the bedroom. That weekend, I got an email from my financial advisor. The new wallet was confirmed. The revised equity statements were filed. And the value of the startup? Tripled. thanks to a successful Series B round that closed 5 days ago. Her name was no longer on the options. Mine was. And she still didn't know. But I wasn't done. While she spent the weekend pretending to relax, yoga in the living room, fake deep podcasts playing on the speaker, texting her boss between downward dogs, I was in the garage scanning receipts. You see, she'd been sloppy and arrogant. Deadly combo. During her MBA, she reimbursed the same expenses twice. Once through her employer, once through her student loan disbursement. Thousands of dollars. Fancy dinners listed as networking, with a receipt from the exact same night she billed her university for research materials. One time she got a refund from the MBA conference and still invoiced it to her firm. And I had the records. All of them. Bound, labeled, time-stamped. I sent the second envelope out on Monday morning. This one had a little more flair. Sent to the board members directly, marked urgent, potential compliance risk. Then I waited. That Friday, she came home white as a ghost. They're doing a formal audit, she said, slumping onto the couch. Oh no, I said, trying not to grin. Is it serious? She didn't answer, just stared at the TV like it was going to explain her whole life back to her. But the real show started the following week. I was working out back, pruning the old cedar tree when I heard the doorbell. I peeked around the side yard and saw a man and a woman in suits. Real corporate types, holding badges. One had a laptop case. The other carried a folder. I slipped inside the side door and watched from the hallway. They were there for her. An on-site interview, they said. Standard procedure for conflict of interest inquiries. Her voice cracked when she offered them tea. I watched from the top of the stairs as they sat at the same kitchen table where she once toasted her new position with a glass of Prosecco and kissed her phone screen goodnight to him. Now, she looked like a scared intern. The woman opened a folder. We just want to clarify a few inconsistencies, she said. And then, like a trapdoor opening under a magician's assistant, the floor of her perfect little life gave way. And she still hadn't realized. I was the one holding the lever. She barely spoke to me that night. After the auditors left, she went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and just stared at the wall like someone had unplugged her. No makeup remover, no skincare routine, no silk pajamas. Just the blazer still half on, and her phone clutched in her hand like it was a life vest, and she was drowning. She didn't cry. That's the part that stuck with me. She wasn't sad. She was terrified. Because someone like her, someone who lived off perception, who built her identity on polished LinkedIn posts and women in business panels, was starting to understand what it meant to lose the narrative. I stayed downstairs that night. I sat on the back porch in the dark with a bottle of beer I didn't even want, watching the neighbor's sprinkler go off like clockwork. It was the first time in months I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the damn storm. The next morning, she came downstairs in sweats, hair in a loose knot. No heels, no smug walk, no phone glued to her hand. Can we talk? She asked, voice low. I nodded and moved aside, letting her sit. She looked like a different person, smaller. Like someone had finally popped the air out of her designer ego. I think I made some mistakes, she said, hands folded, eyes darting like she couldn't look me dead in the face. I waited. Let the silence work on her. I didn't mean for any of this to get out of control. I was overwhelmed. The job, the pressure, the MBA. I needed something that felt good, something that made me feel seen. And Mark. Of course his name was Mark. The most cliché name in the executive playbook. He understood that. He saw me. And I guess I leaned on that more than I should have. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I laughed. Out loud. She flinched. What? You weren't trying to hurt me? You just accidentally slept with your boss for months while I was busting my back to fund your climb to the top. She opened her mouth to respond. I raised a hand. Save it. I stood. Took a slow breath, trying not to let the fury override the satisfaction humming beneath it. You made a series of calculated decisions. You cheated. Lied. Used me like an ATM with a heartbeat. Then you smiled in my face like nothing was wrong. I hope Mark was worth it. Her jaw clenched. You don't understand the pressure I was under. No, you don't understand. You're not the victim here. And in case you haven't put it together yet, you're not in control either. Not anymore. That flicker of recognition in her eyes. That was the moment she realized I wasn't just angry. I was ahead of her. Way ahead. She stood, backing away like I was someone she didn't recognize. What did you do? I gave her the same smile she'd given me the night she told me she wanted to separate. A calm, polite, lethal little smile. I moved some things around. That's all. The color drained from her face. What did you do? I leaned in, voice low and steady. You remember that equity you bragged about? The one you said I'd never understand? The shares you toasted with Mark over during that Napa weekend you lied about? She froze. I own them now. Legally. Fully vested. Irrevocable. That's not possible, she whispered. Oh, it is. You should have read what you signed. You were too busy being brilliant to notice the fine print. She staggered back and dropped into the dining chair like she'd been shot. Her fingers trembled. Her mouth opened and closed like she couldn't form a full thought. I'll fight this. You'll try, but it's already done. Signed. Verified. Transferred. She looked up at me, eyes filling, not with tears, but with panic. Raw, primal panic. You planned this. I adapted, I said. You planned this. I just adjusted accordingly. She didn't speak again. Not that day. Later that night, she disappeared into the bedroom. Doors shut, lights off. She didn't touch her phone. Didn't even come out for dinner. I watched her through the crack under the door. Just her feet on the carpet. Motionless. And I thought, this is what she built her entire life to avoid. Accountability. But now, the mask was off. The mirror was clean. And the woman looking back was terrified of herself. The next morning, she was gone. No note. No text. Just gone. Her closet was raided, half the hangers empty, drawers left open like a storm had blown through. She took the MacBook I bought her for graduation, her jewelry box, and one of the 2 suitcases we used on our anniversary trip to Jackson Hole, the same trip she spent texting M while I made dinner over the fire pit. I stood there in our bedroom, watching the ceiling fan spin, and felt absolutely nothing. No rage. No grief. Just air. She had run. Not left. Run. Which meant the walls were closing in faster than she expected. I walked into the kitchen, made myself eggs, and turned on the morning news. I already knew what I was going to hear. I just wanted to see it. Feel it. 10 minutes in, there it was. A breaking ticker at the bottom of the screen. Fintech startup under internal review following whistleblower report. CFO suspended. That was her. CFO. Just promoted 2 months ago. Just long enough to think she was untouchable. I knew the structure of her company inside and out by then. Hell, I'd helped her study for their first pitch deck back when it was just a dream. I remembered her telling me, wine drunk on our couch, they can't grow without me. Bill? They don't even know how to file a damn 10K. Now the whole board was looking at her expense filings with a microscope, and they'd just discovered the $12,000 vendor consulting fee she funneled to Mark's private shelf firm in the Caymans. The one she billed under performance strategy. She thought nobody would notice. She thought I wouldn't know where to look. She forgot I was the one who used to file her taxes. I went in the garage, pulled down the last envelope, thicker than the others, final, and mailed it to the SEC. Then I packed a bag. Just one. Clothes, passport, burner phone. I left everything else in place. Let it rot. Let the termites eat what they built together. I wasn't staying to watch the fireworks. I was just the guy who wired the show. I got in my car and drove south. No destination. Just movement. I stopped only once, at a gas station just outside Barstow, where the air smells like burnt rubber and empty promises. I bought a bottle of water, a pack of gum, and one of those disposable prepaid cards. At the register, the girl looked up and asked, "You heading far?" "Far enough," I said. I slept that night in a cheap desert motel with blood-red curtains and a TV that buzzed when it was off. I didn't dream. My mind was too full, calculations, timestamps, names. All of it spinning in precise orbits. When I woke up, I had 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. And a voicemail from her. She sounded breathless. Not crying, but close. She was whispering, like she didn't want someone else to hear her. "Bill, I don't know what you've done, but everything is falling apart. Mark, he's not answering. They're accusing me of embezzlement. Bill, I could lose everything. I need you to stop this. Please." Whatever this is, just stop it. Call me. Please. You win, okay? You win. I played it twice, then deleted it, because she still didn't get it. This wasn't about winning. This was about balance. And every debt, emotional, financial, moral, was coming due. She just didn't like the currency. I spent the next 3 days driving. No map. No playlist. Just the desert passing by, hour after hour, as the past 7 years of my life unraveled in the rearview mirror. I didn't check my email. I didn't answer the burner. I let the world keep spinning without me while I finally exhaled. Every so often, I'd get flashes, her face the night she told me we should separate. The smirk. The casual cruelty. The part of her that thought I was too dumb, too soft, too wrapped up in love to ever fight back. She built that version of me in her head. Nurtured it. Mocked it behind my back, I'm sure. But the man she underestimated? He was the one pulling the strings now. On the 4th day, I stopped in a coastal town with no chain hotels and no Uber service. Just mom-and-pop diners and old fishermen who stared at you like you owed them something just for breathing their salt-stained air. It was perfect. I rented a room above a bait shop. Cash only. The walls were paper-thin, and the floorboards groaned like they had secrets to tell. I set my phone face down on the desk and finally opened my laptop, not the one she knew about, not the one we used at home. This was mine, the one I'd kept clean, private, sharp. I logged into my offshore wallet. My stock options were maturing nicely. The company hadn't frozen distribution yet, because legally, nothing was proven. Investigated? Sure. But in the absence of formal charges, assets still moved. And oh, did they move? I wired a portion to a separate holding company. The name? Meaningless. Just a shield. From there, I funneled it into 3 investments, a property trust, a green energy startup, and a small fund in the Baltic that specialized in distressed corporate takeovers. Because I wasn't going to just vanish. No, I was going to grow in the places she'd never think to look. By the time she even began to process what happened, I'd already be untouchable. That night, I ate alone at a booth by the window. The waitress was maybe in her late 40s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense smile. She poured my coffee like she'd seen men like me before. She didn't ask questions. Didn't make conversation. Good. After dinner, I checked my inbox. The law firm had finally replied. Subject, divorce proceedings. Mr. Hayward, we've reviewed the financials and the documentation you submitted. We can proceed with a strategic dissolution filing, and in light of the asset reallocation you executed prior to the separation, your exposure is minimal. She has no standing for alimony or restitution. If she files, we're prepared to counter immediately. Also very clean work. Impressive attention to detail. Best. Michael P. Daringer, ESQ. I leaned back in the stiff motel chair and smiled. Not wide. Just enough. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that this wasn't about the money. That was just the tool. The scalpel. This was about stripping everything she used to define herself. Her career? Imploding. Her lover? Ghosted. Word was, Mark had quietly resigned 2 days ago, and according to a message forwarded to me by a friend still in the company's finance team, he'd moved most of his money offshore and left the country. Her reputation? Shredded. The internal audit results hadn't leaked yet, but whispers were already circling. One of her former classmates even posted something cryptic on LinkedIn. Sometimes, the smartest people in the room forget to read the fine print. Accountability catches up, no matter how glossy your resume is. Over the next 48 hours, I watched the dominoes fall from a quiet beach town 3 states away, sipping black coffee and tracking the chaos through encrypted accounts and third-party watchers. And through it all, she kept calling. Voicemail after voicemail. The desperation swelling with each one. The tone shifting from control to pleading. From demanding to begging. Until finally, on the 6th day, a message came through that was nothing but static and one sentence, whispered at the very end. You destroyed me, Bill. Please, I don't even know who I am anymore. I didn't reply, because that was the point. I was mid-bite into a burnt grilled cheese when the alert pinged. Encrypted. Anonymous. But unmistakable. Her lawyer just filed for emergency mediation. Looks like she's panicking. I closed the laptop slowly. Let the silence settle. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. No rush of adrenaline. Just a quiet, steady pulse of completion. She was clawing now, trying to hit the brakes on a car she'd already driven off a cliff. The emergency mediation filing meant she finally realized what I had taken from her and how cleanly I did it. It also meant she understood something else. This wasn't salvageable. Not her career, not her finances, not even her self-image. I walked to the edge of the beach, just past where the shore gave way to jagged rocks. The Pacific was loud that night. The kind of loud that forces your thoughts to shut up for a second. I closed my eyes, breathed in that salt-heavy air, and let her voice echo in my mind. I don't even know who I am anymore. Yeah, well, that makes two of us. Because the man she thought she knew, the quiet pushover, the background character in her story, the guy who paid for everything and asked nothing, he died the moment she looked me in the eye and said, "That doesn't matter anymore." Now she wanted mediation. Now she wanted to sit in a room, cross-legged and polished, and negotiate. Negotiate what, exactly? The house I paid off? The equity I legally acquired? The future I saved while she was busy tearing it apart in hotel rooms? I returned to my room, cracked my knuckles, and pulled out the burner. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, an old friend from undergrad. A data analyst turned private consultant. Used to work in risk compliance for one of the big four until he got sick of corporate backstabbing and built his own thing. He answered after 2 rings. "Bill Hayward. I was wondering when you'd show up in my mess again." I smiled. "I need a favor." "Of course you do. What flavor of fire are we putting out?" "Not a fire. A containment. I need you to scrub every last trace of me from our old joint accounts. Bank, utility, health, and the cloud." A pause. "You're going full Phantom?" She tried to set me on fire and dance in the ashes. "I'm just flipping the script." He whistled low. "All right, but I want to know one thing." "Shoot. Was it worth it?" I glanced out the window. The motel's neon flickered blue against the wet street. She's trying to claim emotional distress because she can't log into her Chase app anymore. He laughed. "Say no more. I'll make you a ghost by morning." And just like that, I pressed the final key. I didn't want a seat at the mediation table. I didn't even want to walk into the room. I wanted her to sit there across from an empty chair. A blank void. A question mark where I used to be. I wanted her to feel that silence. Let it hum in her ears. Let her explain to the mediator why her husband's signature couldn't be summoned. Why the account she thought was hers now belonged to a holding company with no forwarding address. Why the man who once bent over backwards for her now didn't even leave footprints. The next morning, her lawyer called my lawyer, his 10th call in 2 days. "We just need to confirm Mr. Hayward's attendance." My lawyer replied calmly, "Mr. Hayward does not intend to participate. All settlements must go through legal." Silence. Then, weakly, "She's emotionally unstable. She says she doesn't feel safe unless she hears from him directly." My lawyer didn't laugh. I would have. He just said, "That's not Mr. Hayward's concern anymore." And it wasn't. Because you can only spend so long screaming into a void before it starts to scream back. And she was finally hearing it. The mediation meeting happened without me. She showed up, heels clicking, nerves shot, probably rehearsing every excuse she could fit between legal phrases. She had her attorney on one side, a bottle of water in front of her, and a folder of carefully curated lies she probably stayed up all night drafting. The chair across from her? Empty. Just a stack of notarized documents and a silent reminder, "You burned the bridge, and now you get to walk alone." My lawyer said she cracked around the 30-minute mark. Started pacing, then ranting. Said I'd manipulated her. That I was playing some vindictive game. Said she was the victim. She actually used that word, victim. My lawyer didn't flinch. Just calmly slid a manila envelope across the table, filled with her emails to Mark. Screenshots. Dates. Bookings. Expenses. At one point, she actually had the nerve to say, none of this was meant to hurt him. To which my lawyer responded, and yet here we are. No heat. No judgment. Just a scalpel dipped in truth. She left the meeting early. Didn't even collect her folder. That afternoon, I got the final report from my friend, the data analyst. Everything was done. Utilities, removed. Shared cloud storage, wiped. Joint credit lines, closed. Every single legal and financial tether she once had access to, gone. She couldn't even reset her Netflix password without bumping into a wall of encryption. Then came the part one didn't expect. A message from a burner address I'd never seen before. No subject line, just a single paragraph. I get it now. You were never dull. You were never small. You were just quiet. I thought that meant I could walk over you. I didn't know quiet men could burn down empires without making a sound. You win, Bill. I hope it was worth it. No signature. But I knew it was her. I read it once, then deleted it. Because it didn't change a thing. It didn't bring back the years I gave away. The birthdays I missed working overtime. The mortgage payments I bled for so she could have a desk with a skyline view. The way she looked at me across dinner tables while texting someone else. None of it comes back just because the person who broke you finally understands what they've done. That understanding? It's not justice. It's just the sound of their throne collapsing beneath them. Later that evening, I sat at the end of a long pier, legs dangling over the edge, watching the sky boil orange and gold above the horizon. Somewhere behind me, people were laughing over drinks and fried fish. A guitar played. Life went on. But I was still. Finally. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just done. My phone buzzed once more. A final push from the legal team. She's agreed to all terms. No alimony. Full asset retention on your end. NDA clause included. I turned off the phone. Let the waves take over. Because while she was busy trying to negotiate her way back to safety, I had already boarded the lifeboat, pushed off from shore, and lit the damn harbor behind me on fire. She wasn't watching the smoke. She was standing in it. She showed up at my door. I don't know how she found me. Maybe a credit trace, maybe dumb luck, maybe someone I thought I could trust tipped her off. Doesn't matter. It was just past 9 p.m. The ocean outside was black glass. I just finished my second beer, the radio humming some lazy jazz through static when I heard the knock. I opened the door, and there she was. No makeup. No heels. No armor. Just her. Hair pulled back. Eyes swollen. Shoulders hunched like the weight of her world had finally crushed her spine. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. I didn't move. Didn't step back. Didn't invite her in. She shifted. Looked past me, into the little room I now called home. "Is this where you've been?" I stayed silent. She nodded slowly, the silence scraping her raw. "I lost everything, Bill. My job. My reputation. Mark left. His accounts were frozen. My name's in whispers at every firm I've ever applied to. I walk into interviews and people already know. I waited. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say sorry. Not for the affair. Not for the lies. For not seeing who you were. You were the only real thing in my life, and her voice cracked. I spit on it. And now I see what that cost. Still, I said nothing. She looked up at me, one last flicker of the old fire in her voice. "You really won't say anything?" "I already did," I said quietly. "You just didn't listen." She stepped back, lips trembling, then turned and walked down the steps into the dark. I closed the door. Didn't lock it. Didn't need to. Some doors don't reopen, not because they can't, but because what used to live behind them doesn't exist anymore. The subpoena hit her like a freight train. Just when she thought the storm had passed, when the media stopped circling, when she finally landed a remote consulting gig for a third-rate fintech in Austin, it landed on her doorstep like a ghost she couldn't outrun. The SEC had taken their sweet time, but they'd taken interest. Because one of the names in that final envelope I sent wasn't just Mark's. It was hers. The Cayman funnel. The misused expense accounts. The falsified reimbursement memos. The overlapping dates, the fabricated vendors. All tied to her login. Her signature. Her arrogance. She had no idea I'd kept that file. The one from the startup's beta testing phase, where she bragged in an internal Slack thread about creative accounting and said, "It's only fraud if you get caught, right?" It was a joke. I'm sure she laughed. The SEC didn't. My lawyer called to let me know I'd likely be contacted as a foundational witness. I said sure. I had time. I had everything now. The house was sold. Quietly. Through a proxy. The money from the equity? Diversified. Stable. Feeding into long-term investments under a new LLC, far beyond her legal reach. The burner phone? Destroyed. I carried a clean one now, registered under a name that didn't exist last year. And me? I lived in a place with no past, where the mail came late and the neighbors kept to themselves. I drank coffee from a mug with no logo and walked the cliffs every morning like a man who'd never seen a boardroom, never pulled a ledger apart like bone from cartilage, never learned how betrayal could make a man clearer, not colder. But then the phone buzzed again. Not from her. From the press. A journalist had caught wind of the audit report, wanted to speak off the record, said he had a source from inside her old company who claimed there was a second whistleblower. I agreed to meet. Just once. Just to see how far her empire had sunk into the mud. We met at a diner an hour up the coast. Neutral ground. I wore sunglasses, a cap, and a name he didn't question. He talked fast. Young. Hungry. Thought he'd landed the scoop of the quarter. Did you know about the Caymans thing before you filed the compliance tip? I sipped my coffee. I knew enough. He leaned in. Her partner said she tried to pin the whole thing on him. He skipped the country when the internal audit came down, left her with the books. Now she's radioactive. No firm will touch her. I looked out the window. A boy flew a kite alone on the beach. The wind pulled hard, but he held on. The journalist tried again. Off the record, man. Seriously. What made you come forward? I looked at him and said, slowly, people only call it revenge when you leave a trail. I didn't. And then I stood, dropped enough cash to cover both our checks, and walked out before he could say another word. Because the truth wasn't his to print. It belonged to me now. And in 2 more days, that truth would arrive in a courtroom where she would finally be forced to stand in front of people who didn't care about her MBA, her polished smile, her LinkedIn testimonials. Just the facts. And all of them were true. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't buzz or hum or shift in your seat. The kind that waits. It was federal. White walls, stainless fixtures, cheap carpet that muted footsteps. There were no cameras. No crowd. Just a judge, a few attorneys, and her. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in a week. Hair flat. Lips bare. No designer handbag this time. Just a yellow folder clutched like a life preserver in a sea where no one planned to save her. I sat in the back. Unannounced. Anonymous. I wasn't required to appear. My deposition was already filed, airtight, precise, time-stamped to hell and back. But I wanted to see it. The final breath. The empire's last gasp. She didn't see me at first. Her focus was locked forward, jaw tight, trying to brace for something she couldn't spin. The prosecutor walked her through a gentle but merciless sequence. Expense logs, Cayman transfers, contradictory memos, the missing consulting vendor who turned out to be a P.O. box in Delaware. Then came the email printouts. Her words, her tone, that confidence, that smug, untouchable voice of a woman who believed she could juggle deception and power and come out clean. It's not a big deal. Mark's cleaning it before audit hits. It's not fraud if it clears before quarter close. He's mine. He'll bury it. Mark wasn't here. Mark was gone. Vanished. Possibly living in Zurich under a new name, if the wire trace was accurate. His silence cost her everything. And now she was alone. The judge didn't need theatrics. This wasn't TV. No one banged a gavel. No one screamed. But when the judge spoke, even the walls listened. Given the volume of evidence and the defendant's access to sensitive financial infrastructure at the time of these filings, the court finds sufficient grounds to proceed to formal trial. Bail is conditionally approved, but federal monitoring will be in place immediately. Translation, she wasn't walking away from this. Not this time. Not ever. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder. She flinched. Then her eyes scanned the room. And stopped. On me. I didn't smile. Didn't blink. Just met her stare, flat and steady. As if to say, this is your mirror now. Look as long as you want. She didn't cry. She couldn't. That would have meant feeling something beyond panic. But her mouth twitched. Not a word. Just a silent, I never thought it would come to this, curled up in her throat and died there. I stood before the verdict was even finalized and walked out. Outside, the air was warm. The sun hit different. The kind of sun that feels earned. I climbed into a nondescript rental and drove east. No music. Just the road and the sound of finality. And somewhere between mile markers, I realized I didn't need to look back. Not to make sure. not to gloat. I'd already walked through the fire. She was just learning what it meant to burn.